Hello and welcome back to She's in Focus, the podcast dedicated to inspiring and empowering female filmmakers and videographers from all walks of life and on every step of their creative journey. I'm your host, Kel Grant, an aspiring filmmaker from New Jersey who's just trying to turn my passion into something more and connect with amazing women who have the same passion for video. One of those being Katy Payne, a filmmaker, pastor, and musician from Bonney Lake, Washington. With 10 years of experience in the film industry, Katy loves capturing ordinary moments that create beautiful stories and is passionate about helping women find safe spaces in male-dominated industries. Katy, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun and just such a cool opportunity that you're creating for women and for this community. And so thanks for doing this. This is awesome.
Of course, we have the same mission, I think.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And did I say that right? Is it Bonney Lake or?
It is. You nailed
Perfect.
it. Yeah,
Okay,
about 45 minutes south
word.
of Seattle.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So is a lot of your business actually based out of Seattle for that reason? Do you market to Seattle?
No, we actually don't. I'm actually not a city girl. I'm more of a suburb kind of girl. So we actually tend to go more south into Tacoma and Olympia. And then we've actually done a lot of weddings and stuff in Eastern Washington to kind of the desert vibe that we're going for. So pretty fun.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know how saturated the market is out there. I mean, because I'd imagine that most videographers or creatives are near the city. Do you find that you have a lot of competition in your area in the suburbs?
Yeah, I feel like anywhere right now, video is kind of becoming a saturated market.
That's a good point, yeah.
Which I think is awesome. Like, it's an industry that I think was neglected for a long time. And so I think it's cool that there's been so much growth. But yeah, I mean that, market saturation is a problem that any business has, but it's something that I celebrate because I just see that means that we're not going away anytime soon. So
it means we're doing something right.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. So one of the things that you're most passionate about is helping women kind of enter and navigate and thrive and find their safe space in these male-dominated areas and fields. And you do this in several roles in your life. I'd love for you to kind of talk through those roles and your experience being a woman in a boys' club, essentially.
Yeah. So really for me, I feel like that's kind of been my life since childhood. As a kid, everyone said I was a tomboy. Like, I was out climbing trees and riding bikes and stuff, which it was really funny because as a kid, you don't really realize kind of the connotations of what that means, because I would go inside and then I had a giant wall of Polly Pockets. Are you old enough to remember Polly Pockets?
Yes.
So I had the Polly Pocket mall, and so it was like I would still have tree bark in my hair from climbing trees, and then I was playing with my Polly Pockets. And now as an adult, I'm like, why did those things have to be exclusive to each other? That's just kind of who I was. And thankfully, I had parents who were just like, go be you and do what you want to do, which was cool. So it was always just interesting growing up as a kid, being interested in Barbies and Polly Pockets and loving to play football and rollerblade. And favorite movie was The Mighty Ducks, So I've always just been that dichotomous person. And then getting older, I started playing music, which again, a predominantly male industry, especially in the early 2000s. And my main instrument is the drums. And so when I started learning drums when I was 18, there were like no female drummers. And even now it's like, people are like, you're a girl drummer. And I'm like, can I just be a drummer? Who, like, you're never like, you're a guy drummer, So that's really funny. And then again, as a pastor, like, church world, that's a whole different thing, but like just aren't a lot of female pastors. And then, as you know, the whole reason for this podcast as a filmmaker, I think there's now, thankfully, more of us out there than we thought there were, which is awesome. But even in that, like, that's a tough industry for a female to break into. I've done weddings where I show up and my second shooter's a guy and the photographer's trying to talk to him, and he's like, oh, actually, she's the head honcho. And he's like, oh, that's cute. So what do you think? And I'm like, okay, it's going to be like that. That's cool. So I feel like in a way that wasn't at all planned or designed, it's just naturally become a passion, because that's just been my life experience of, I'm a woman who's interested in these things that have typically been for men. But now there's kind of this little inkling of a space for me to sneak in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, for you to do it in so many different areas of your life, you must really feel like you have to kind of pave your own way and make room for yourself in these spaces. I could imagine.
A little bit, yeah. It's definitely been a journey trying to figure some of this out. Like in filmmaking, especially, it's hard to find. Thinking back to your first podcast episode, talking about how there's hardly any female creatives on YouTube. If you look
Yeah.
up filmmakers, predominantly they're all men,
Yeah.
which is great, and they have a lot to offer, but it's just not a woman, and that just hits different. Um, and in music, being a female drummer and trying to figure that out, and being like, there's just not a lot of people to go before me in a lot of those things. And so, yeah, I think paving your own way is a good way to put it. And it's a fun place to be in. I like the challenge, but it can be kind of lonely sometimes in that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I think it's interesting what you said before about, like, why can't I just be a drummer? Why do I have to have that label? And it's something that I've kind of struggled with the idea of too in filmmaking. But, in recent times, the label of female filmmaker has become so important to me because of course it sets me apart from others in the industry, but it's also been such an identifier for other women to be able to find me and connect with me. I use the hashtag female filmmaker wherever I can, whenever I can. And I'm always searching on that hashtag on all the social media sites. I'm Googling it every chance I get, because it's a way to kind of build a community.
Yeah.
Men never have to Google male filmmakers. They'll never be in that boat for anything, really.
Yeah.
In those typically male dominated roles. So yeah, I've kind of switched that mentality of it's, you're labeling me as a female filmmaker. Well, I'm proud of that, and I'm going to get your sisters. You know what I mean? And we're bringing everybody in. Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully a day comes where we don't need that hashtag, where you can do filmmaker and it's just a good 50-50.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be in our time, but
maybe not. But if we can pave the way for our daughters and our friends,
Absolutely.
I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. So what female role models do you have, I guess in any of the areas? Because the main reason for this podcast was it was kind of a selfish venture when I first sought out, because I was just looking for inspiration. And what inspires me most is seeing women who look like me or are on the same path as me, doing what I want to do, having the same dreams as me. So this was a way for me to find that exact group. But it ended up turning into something more, where now this podcast serves as a source of inspiration for other women. And other women who are interested in filmmaking or don't know where to start, or just looking for other females in the industry, they can turn to this podcast to find it. So I kind of have some female role models all over the place. I mean, you're one of them. Anybody who I have on the show becomes a role model because you're kind of stepping into the light, so to speak, and sharing your story and standing up and saying, I'm a female filmmaker, I'm part of this community. And it doesn't have to be, because I think if I were to look to Hollywood, right, or any of the, even YouTube, like I was saying, there's like no female filmmakers on YouTube. Right. If I were to look to those spaces solely for inspiration, and I had to search so hard to find female representation, I think it would discourage me. So I kind of, I used to think of role models, they had to have a certain number of followers, they had to have a certain amount of projects under their belt, or a certain amount of accolades. But now I just find that every woman in this space is a role model to me. So I'm just wondering what female role models do you have in the film space, or in music, or in ministry as well?
Yeah, I think my answer to that might be a little different than what you expect. Because like you said, it's hard to find women in Hollywood, in particular. I think one of them, are you an Office fan?
Of course.
Okay, that's good. That's my ultimate fandom. Jen Salata, who's one of the primary writers, and she was a showrunner in the later half of The Office. It's been interesting listening to podcasts with her. And she's not even a filmmaker, she's a writer. But talking about how, especially comedy in the early 2000s, again, was a predominantly male industry and talking about her journey into writing and what that looked like, and working with the male writers. Because I think she was one of maybe 2 women who actually wrote full scripts on the show. So she's been a really big one, and she's just really fun to listen to. Obviously, I don't know her personally, but she's really impacted just my mindset on being someone of that scale and having to overcome those obstacles with men who are such home run hitters. And that has been really cool. Other than that, honestly, my primary role models are my closest friends. They're all super creative in their own right. Like my best friend Katy, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, is one of the photographers on my team. And honestly, like there's no one else whose pictures I like more. You know, she's just, I champion her because her pictures are great. And my friend Julia can draw just such amazing pictures of you and has her own little Etsy shop. And my friend Darcy can make cakes that look lifelike and they're beautiful. And so I think for me, having those women as my 3 closest people in life who are all so creative in their own right have really encouraged me just to say, what are my gifts? How can I do this? How can I apply this no matter where I go? And we're just each other's biggest fans. I mean, we're constantly shouting each other out on Instagram, and I just don't think there's anything greater than a few women who are bound together by that, you know. And as far as drumming goes, there's not many. But Jen Ledger from a band called Skillet, not my favorite band, but she drums in like 6-inch stilettos.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
that's just like badassery in its own right, you know?
Yeah.
I haven't arrived there yet. I'm not brave enough, but that's pretty cool.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's so amazing that you have that kind of core group of women, because, you know, supporting each other and just being there for each other, and also just inspiring each other. I think it's, you know, not very many people are lucky enough to find that. Yeah. And that's so amazing that you have, and you recognize it and you're grateful for it.
Oh yeah. They're the best.
Yeah.
Had to shout them out.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about Katy, and I think Darcy's also part of your dream team. We'll talk about those ladies a little bit later. So I do want to know how, because, you know, our personalities, there are so many things that intersect, right? So it's not just that you're a filmmaker. It's not just that you're a drummer. It's that you are a filmmaker, you are a drummer, you are a pastor. It's all of these things come together to make you who you are. Yeah. So I'm just wondering how your filmmaking, how does filmmaking intersect with your career as a pastor? How have you used your video skills in that field to influence that field?
Yeah, video is actually how I came to be a pastor, which is really funny. Yeah, so video was one of those things that I was always really interested in as a kid, but video cameras cost like $1 bajillion in the 90s, you know? And so about 10 years ago when I turned 20, I got hired on staff at the church that I was going to at the time. And they had known that I had like a little bit of video skill, and that I could, one of my biggest talents, I feel like, in filmmaking is being able to take stories and see the beauty in people's stories and share that. And so they saw that I kind of had that raw gift. And they were like, hey, like, we're going to bring you on part-time to do administrative stuff, but then also we want you to help our video guy, and it'll let you learn from him, and then it'll just give him another set of hands. So I spent maybe 4 or 5 years working under him. His name was Brian. And he was just the most patient, and also just the smartest person I've ever met in my whole life. And he taught me so many things. And so basically through a series of events that I'll spare you from because it took 10 years, about 3 years ago was when I actually started doing filmmaking kind of on the side as a hobby. My skill level had jumped tremendously in that time. And I had started going to a new church, and the lead pastor there was like, hey, you could play music. You have all these video skills. I have none of that. Will you come alongside me and be my creative pastor? And so now my role is to work with him. And so I oversee all our music, all our tech stuff, creative elements of our services. So video, lighting, sound, slides, anything like that. And then I also preach every like 5 or 6 weeks or so. And so that role is really fun for me because it's kind of like the dream job if it's like, let's take all these skills that you have and that you love and just put them into one and pay you for all of them. And I'm like, what?
That's the key right there.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah. Full-time salary.
Paid,
come on.
Yes.
Oh, it's awesome. So that's short version of how kind of all that came to be to intersect with ministry.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that role, especially like, it's just one of those things where, you know, if the opportunity presents itself, you absolutely, couldn't have turned it down.
Right.
That sounds like it's the ideal position. So I am curious, because you mentioned storytelling and that you kind of always had a knack for that.
Yeah.
What makes video a passion of yours? What do you love about film?
Oh man, I love capturing moments that people can relive for the rest of their lives in real time. Obviously, photographs do that to an extent, but if you show someone a photograph, you kind of have to give them the context behind it. And this is where it was and who was there, whatever. Video, you don't have to do that. It tells its own story. And I just feel like there's so much beauty in such ordinary moments. Like, obviously, weddings are a huge day and they're super fun and you want to remember that forever. But I can remember making highlight videos for my soccer team in junior high and watching those and be like, oh, that was just a really funny moment when that person fell, or this moment in the game was a huge growth moment for my teammate. And how cool is it that she gets to see that live before her eyes? And so I just think there's something beautiful about capturing ordinary moments that people can then relive for the rest of time without having to tell the story, because film tells its own story behind it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know how your faith kind of intersects with that specific aspect as well, because my friend Christian, he went to Liberty University, and he's not a pastor yet, but he's going down that track. He does a lot of like works with a lot of youth groups and things like that, and he started getting into filmmaking, and just the way that he's able to impact his audience, especially with the pandemic, a lot of churches are going virtually, it's just you hit like a different nerve when you're talking about such beautiful or heavy topics, or when it has something to do with faith, and then you're able to accompany that message. Because that's the thing, I feel like with a lot of, because I grew up in the church, so I feel like the main thing about church was always the message. Yeah. Right. It was always the story to be told. It was always the sermon. So him being able to combine that message with just beautiful imagery, or to evoke more emotions, I think it really impacts his message for the better and connects with his audience on a different level. Yeah. Have you experienced that at all with creating videos?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the American church too, good, bad, and the ugly, right? Because it's all there. America itself is such a media-driven society. Like, we can't rip ourselves away from our phones because we love seeing videos, being constantly connected, and things like that. And so for the American church in particular, I feel like media is almost just the best way to capture their attention. You know, I've had moments where I leave the stage and I'm like, that was the best sermon that I've ever preached in my life. And 2 days later, no one remembers that. But what people remember is the testimony video of the couple who we shared, whose marriage was saved through going through counseling or something like that. And like, those stories are the things that people remember the most, which like share the gospel of Jesus in their own right? Because obviously that's what I'm about since I'm a pastor. And so like, those aren't any more or less than the message that we preach for 30 minutes. It's just a different element to that story. And so I think it's something that pastors don't put enough emphasis on is visual media in the church, and how effective it can be when done well. Because I think there's a point where it's like, this is too much of a show, little too flashy, not sincere. But when thought through and when done really well, it adds to what we're already doing, and it just helps people remember that much more, the point of why they take this hour or two on Sunday to commit to this thing. So it can be really beautiful when done well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like, how great is it to get to express your faith or your passion through film? There's nothing better.
And like I said, like, those are timeless. We're going to have those forever. And so for that couple to be able to look back and be like, man, look where we were when we were in our 20s compared to 16 years later, is a cool moment for them too. So
Even when at my old church, when the worship band was playing, they would put like a video of it was usually like moving clouds with
Yeah.
lyrics up, something cheesy like that.
Right.
But even just like the audio visual elements to just the production of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can just add so much. So you are you work full time with the church, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So would you say that, but you also have your own production company, so that is more of a side gig, right?
Yes, that is my payoff car, vacation money, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Do you ever have plans of going full time, or do you like having, your own thing and then working in that dream role that you were talking about at your church?
Right. So at one time, I wanted to go full scale, full-time production company, work for myself. I thought that would be awesome. What I discovered about myself is that while I love filmmaking, I am a horrible entrepreneur and a horrible business person, which is like good, it's that self-awareness is good to have.
Right.
And at some point for me, when I was trying to make that a full-time thing, because I was like, oh, there's actually a lot more money here than working at a church.
Yeah,
maybe this is something I want to do. But I got so far into that it just took all the joy out of it for me. And I was getting so bogged down with taxes and licensing and all the stuff that leads up to the actual wedding day or the actual production, that by the time I got to that, my heart wasn't in it. And I would dread it, and I would dread the editing process because I had so many other things I had to think about. And so now for me, being able to have that steady paycheck where I'm like, I know this money's going to be here every month. This extra money from my production company is just a happy bonus that I get to do whatever I want to do with it. I feel like it's just taken a lot of pressure off of me. And so I can still
100%.
enjoy the creative process and go through life knowing that I will probably never run a business and be totally okay with that in a large scale.
Yeah. I'm actually very happy to hear you say that because I'm in the exact same boat. I work full time in marketing for a tech company, and it's I like the job. It's nothing like it's I do content operations and project management. So it's not video production. I get to do like some video projects, but it's not primarily video productions. But what I've learned about myself too is if I have to, right now it's my side business, but it's also my hobby. And because it's my hobby, I have such a passion for it, and I look forward to doing it, right? If your hobby then becomes your full-time job, then you're right. All that pressure gets put into that, and, you're experiencing the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. And then now you have to rely on that for income.
Right.
Which, and running a production company, it's, 1 month you could have 10 clients, the next month you could have none. And with things like the pandemic, you never know how things are going to impact your business. Right. Luckily, I'd say the film industry as a whole kind of made this shift and adjusted well during the pandemic. But for me, I think the sweet spot is just that balance between full-time and part-time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I get to choose the projects I want to work on.
Yep.
Because, you're not relying on it. You don't have to take this gig to put food on the table. You really get to have that creative freedom and control of the projects that you work on and how you build your portfolio. So I think it's the best of both worlds.
I do too. I love it. It's great.
I have no regrets. We're on the same page. Exactly.
Kindred spirits.
Yes. So were you self-taught because you had a mentor when you first went into that first church gig, but you also said that you had some video classes maybe back in high school?
Yeah, I took so like I said, would make like soccer team highlight videos and was like, this is something that sounds fun. So throughout junior high and high school, took some video production, broadcasting, even did a little newscasting, which was not my thing. I hated that.
I feel like we've all been down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, they always try to I'm like, I don't want to be in front of the camera. It's just awkward. But it's fine. It was a good skill to use. And so took some classes. Those primarily, looking back on them, were more about editing than they were about actual camera work. Like I didn't learn anything about f-stop or shutter speed or even really white balance until I started working at the church. And once I learned those things, it was like, this would have made my editing life so much easier.
I know.
Oh man. So yeah, I was like, it's really nice that you taught me how to like, cut stuff and put in weird motion graphics, but to have to not color correct everything would have been just epic. But yeah, so took enough to kind of skate by until I got the church job. But really, that's kind of where the predominant portion of my training happened, was under Brian.
Got it. And when did you start to notice a visible and a clear shift in your filmmaking abilities? Because you entered this gig with Brian and you started learning about the technical and practical aspects of filmmaking. Did you have a few gigs under your belt and you were starting to gain confidence, or was there a point when you were like, wow, I can do this, I am fully confident in myself, from pre-production to post-production, I'm good to go?
Yeah, so that's kind of funny how that happened. I had a really good friend who was getting married one year, and she was like, hey, we only have like $500 left in our wedding budget, and I know it's not a lot, but can you just come and make us a little video, because you're going to be there anyway? And so I was like, like I might as well. Why not? It'll be fun. It'll be good to have that under my belt. So I went, and I look back at that video now and I'm like, oh man, I feel like I should almost reshoot their wedding for them, because it's just like oh man, so many things. But the story part of it is what I feel like captured really well in some of the more intimate details of the day. So that was in the summertime. And then the following spring, I actually had like 10 friends in one year who were getting married. It was just insane. And they had all
something in the air.
I know, it was, I don't know what was in the water that year, but I missed it. Let's just say that. I did not drink from that well. It's a bummer.
I feel you.
But all 10 of those friends had seen that video that I had made, and they were like, hey, we just loved how sweet that was. Can we hire you to do that? And so I went from shooting one wedding one summer when I barely knew what I was doing to now having 10 weddings on the book and making more money than I ever have in my entire life. And it was the most stressful year of my life. I was so miserable and whatever, but it was a good experience. And it's kind of what launched me into the side gig that I have now, and rediscovering my passion for things like that, and storytelling and filmmaking. So it was good. Long year, but good year.
Yeah. I bet like that was a year where you were just kind of learning by doing. Just after, I'm sure after every video, you take what you learn and you do it better for the next video. That's the best practice, is to just go out and do it.
Yeah, a lot has changed since then, that's for sure.
Yes. So how are you kind of elevating your skills at the moment? Are you like incorporating things like drone work or animation or anything like that? Or are you just focusing on mastering a particular skill?
Yeah, so how we met, the full-time filmmaker course, has obviously been huge for that. Shout out Parker Walbeck. That place is great. Yes. They're always posting new content, so I follow them pretty closely. On a more like day-to-day practical level, I learn a lot by teaching other people, because that requires me to kind of bring it down and be like, okay, how do I explain this skill to someone who's never held a camera, who's never opened Premiere Pro before? Like, how do I make this really tangible for them? So I try to teach some of the volunteers at church how to do some of those things, and that just keeps my skills sharp. And then, I mean, any opportunity I can, even if it's just with my iPhone, if I'm hiking at Mount Rainier, one of the most beautiful places on earth, I'm taking pictures, I'm taking short little videos, do some time lapses, just try to keep that skill sharp as much as I can in my day-to-day life has been really helpful.
Yeah, keep flexing that creative muscle for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. Tell me about your business. It appears you are in business with your best friends.
Yes.
How did this happen? Tell me the origin story.
So it's good. So I had my video production company, which predominantly was weddings. I kind of took a journey where I started working for a real estate agent for a little bit. So I did get my drone license. Forgot to mention that in your last question. So I have drone stuff, learned to shoot real estate, stuff like that. And then I was like, this is fun, but that's not really what I want to do either. So I took a pause and was kind of like, okay, what do I actually want to do here? And a lot of the inquiries that I had coming in were asking if I had a photographer recommendation or a photographer that I had worked with. And I didn't at the time. And so I would say, no, sorry, like right now it's just me. And I actually lost a lot of business because I didn't have a photographer recommendation, and they would go to other photographers who had this whole team and this whole package and whatever. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, I need to reevaluate this. And about that time, my best friend, whose name is also Katy, and we're roommates, and we drink the same drink at Starbucks. So people always think that they're on Punk'd when they're with us. It's awesome.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's pretty great life. She started getting really into photography, had just such a natural talent for it. It was like, it was kind of frustrating. Like she just picked it up and started doing it, and it looked world class. And I was like, well, that's just wrong for so many reasons, but awesome for me. And so she had started doing a lot of like family, maternity shoots, you know, all the stuff, senior grad photos. And so she was asking me like, hey, how do I turn this into something that's legal, that's a business, that's lucrative?
Profitable. Yeah.
And so I was explaining it to her, and we both kind of had this moment where it was like, should we just make this a thing? Like our whole, like we spend every living day together, because she also works at our church too. And so,
oh my goodness,
I know it's ridiculous when people are like, "Is this real life?" You know, I'm like, "Yeah, it is. You're not on Punk'd." But so we were like, this just makes sense, and then it's going to get us both more business because we can recommend people, and so we just kind of started that. And then once I added photography onto our packages, business was booming. And actually now we actually get more photo work than we do video work. Which is great. I'm like not threatened by that at all. So in the last year, I've learned really quickly how to become a second shooter. And then our friend Darcy is also a really great photographer. And so for moments where they want a videographer and 2 photographers, we also have Darcy in the mix, who can come in there. And then I do all of our drone operations. So I'll get videos and photos and things like that. But yeah, we're a pretty fun team. And you know, you probably know too, like as a videographer, it can be really intimidating to have to walk into somewhere with a photographer and be like, are we going to mesh? Is our creative space going to kind of be the same? Is it going to be this weird like power battle for time and all that? And so just having someone that I know I work with well, where we have the same vision and where we can just ebb and flow with each other, it makes the day a lot easier for people that you're shooting for, like especially brides and stuff. Like their anxiety just is instantly eased when they see how well we work together. And so that whole story is super funny because our lives are so interconnected, but it's just really cool how it's worked out. And like we vacation together all the time. So it's like, oh, is this just our vacation fun now? Okay, cool. That sounds awesome. Let's hop a plane, you know? So it's good.
I mean, not only is it great to get to work with your best friend, but it was also just such a smart business strategy too. I mean, I've never even considered the fact that, if you bundle photo and video into the same company, like it's your one-stop shop for all services that you need.
Yeah. And then you just give people a little bit of a discount because it's like, you know, a couple $100 off is worth it for me, like I said, to work with someone that I know I like. Because I've worked with a lot of photographers where I'm like, I will never set foot on anywhere with you again. And so it's worth losing $200-300 to know that my day is going to be a lot easier too.
Right. Are there any challenges because they always say, you know, don't work with family, and it sounds like Katy's more like family than a friend at this point. So are there any like challenges about working with your best friend?
Probably for most people there would be. Neither of us are afraid of conflict, and we've learned to have really good conflict resolution skills. And so far in business together, we haven't really had any moments where we've had to deal with anything like that, because I mean, I technically am the business owner. So at the end of the day, you know, if there's a decision that has to be made, it's kind of understood that I'm going to be the one making it. But that doesn't come without me asking the opinion of Katy and of Darcy and just being like, hey, does this make sense for all of us? What do you guys want to do? And so I feel like we've been lucky enough that it's just like we're adults and we act like adults, and that just tends to make life and business and relationships really easy. So far that hasn't been a bridge that we've had to cross, which is nice.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I literally have never heard a story like yours. I'm
We
just
get that a
blown
lot.
away. Yeah, I mean, between you getting, your full-time job is like the dream job for
Yeah.
you, and then you have this business with your best friend
Yeah.
where you get to make videos and photography, and it's just you're just living the life.
I am. And Katie and I actually own a house together too. So like
Oh my
that's great.
goodness.
Like our friends were like, "Hey, we want to sell this, but like off market and we'll give you a really good deal." And it was like, "Okay, sounds good." And so we're just two ladies owning a home together and making it
Yeah.
work, and yeah,
You're tied together for life.
we really are. Yeah, she's stuck with me. So the joke's on her, but it's a good
That's
time.
too funny.
We party.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So what would you consider your niche weddings? Because I saw your portfolio and you do have some experience in other areas, marketing, some personal videos, real estate. What would you say you focus on?
Weddings. Yeah, weddings are probably our primary thing that we get inquiries for. I'm always open to anything that'll give me new experiences and build my portfolio, especially small businesses who often don't have the budget to hire a big production company. Like, we try to stay as budget friendly as we can while still making it worth our time. So I have some fitness videos on there for people. We've done product photography and stuff like that, but our primary inquiries come from weddings, especially here in the PNW, elopements. And I mean, we just have such incredible scenery here. It's unbeatable.
Yeah.
And so wedding photography is just like the peak of all peaks here. So,
Right.
yeah.
What is your ideal project to work on? If you do you just love weddings more than anything else, aside from it being like a lucrative business prospect there?
Not particularly. Weddings are actually the most stressful days of my entire life. Especially, it's different if I know the person. It tends to be more fun. But if you don't know the person, you're kind of like, what personalities am I walking into? Am I going to get bridezilla? Am I going to get momzilla? You know, what's happening? Probably my ideal stuff is actually when I just get to share people's stories. So I've actually had other churches who have seen my work, who have hired me, who are like, hey, we want to make a music video with this song that we wrote. And so then that's really fun because they often involve me in pre-production too. And how do we tell the best story? And they've hired me to shoot like testimony, marriage type videos. There's not a huge market for those, and even churches don't often have the cash to be able to back that up. So I think if money wasn't an option, that's what I would do, just full time, because I love sharing those stories. But weddings are fun. I get to go a lot of cool places and meet a lot of cool people and eat really awesome food at a lot of different weddings. And if you're a videographer and you don't have dinner in your contract, you're making a big mistake, because you get the best food at weddings.
So I've been told. I shot one wedding back in high school for my cousin. And when you were talking about when you look back at the first wedding you shot, you were like, I wish I could reshoot that. This was just, oh my gosh, it was atrocious. And I told the story in the podcast before, but I'll give you a brief summary. I shot it when I was 18. You know, I was taking some TV production classes in high school, but I had like a little Canon T5i. Didn't really, know what I was doing. I had two cameras because my mom had the same camera that I did. So she was in the aisle, she's shaking back and forth. She's talking to my dad the whole time during the ceremony. Like, you only hear
she was
her
that
talk.
Lady.
Yes, exactly. The one that all videographers and photographers hate during the ceremony. Yeah, that was her. And I'm manning the tripod back there, and I was so kind of ashamed with the way that this came together, and I was so intimidated by it, because at that point I didn't have the skills to be able to, go through pre-production and production, and even production, and then of course post-production. I didn't even understand like the storytelling aspect of it. So I didn't give the video to her, and I let it sit for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And then after, it must have been, right after I finished my undergrad, I had gone to school, to university for video production and TV and radio production. So I opened back up the archives, and I was like, you know what? It's their like 5-year wedding anniversary. Let me give this to them as a gift. And yeah, I was able to, it wasn't even though that was like 3 years ago, I'd still be able to do a better job now. But just the storytelling is such a big part of it. I feel like when I was growing up, I would always see wedding films that were just very chronological. They had like some like, you know, orchestrated music in the back, but there was no like cinematic storytelling like you get nowadays. Like I saw some of your wedding films and it's like a little movie.
Well, thank you.
It's just amazing. So it's just, I said all that to say, I got dinner that day at at that wedding back in high school, but I never followed through on my end of the bargain. But I also didn't have a contract, so I guess.
Well, so you know, you're not legally bound to anything then.
Exactly.
You're fine.
Yeah. Technically, it was her fault then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Amazing. So, so when did you actually launch your business? What year?
That's a fantastic question. 2017, I believe. 2018.
Okay,
somewhere.
Right. So you're still a few years before the pandemic.
Yep.
How did the pandemic affect your business?
Oh man, especially because it was more of a side gig than it was full time. I mean, it virtually went to nothing last year. We ended up shooting one wedding in Eastern Washington in July, where things were a lot less restricted than they were here on the west side of the mountains. And even then, it was a really small family wedding. And I'm pretty sure that was the only wedding that we shot last year. Katy had some senior photos, some maternity shoots, birth announcement, things like that. So photography was way more in demand for us, but videography, I mean, was almost virtually nothing, which was nice in a way because I felt like I got to take the majority of time in the pandemic and kind of re-hone my skills. So spent a lot of time in the full-time filmmaker course, even just going back to basics and going back to lighting, you know, and things like that. And looking back at some of my old videos and be like, okay, what would I change? What would I do differently? And then obviously church world, we had to go to recording and being online, and we didn't have any live stream equipment. So we're a smaller church, and we actually rent out the building of another church. And so live streaming wasn't really an option. So what we were doing is I was setting up a whole recording system in my living room, and I would lead acoustic worship, and then the pastor would record himself preaching, and he'd send that to me, and I'd edit those together.
Oh my goodness.
Which was insane. And then when we finally got to kind of start meeting back in our building, we would just have the band and the production team, and we would record the service start to finish, and I would color correct, and I would cut in all the different lyrics and scripture and things like that. So while my business wasn't lucrative, my skills were still staying sharp because of my actual full-time job. So it was kind of 50-50. It was good and it was bad for a lot of different reasons. But I think the film industry in general really had to reevaluate how they do things. And Katy and I had a lot of really interesting conversations about this. Is like, we're really glad that we're not just wedding people, you know, because it was like there were no weddings last year. And I have a lot of friends who are like, that's their niche. That's what they do. And then they had to quickly figure out, oh gosh, how do I go find product photography or music videos or things like that I can still film now. And so for us, it was kind of a blessing in disguise of like, we kind of have our hands in all these different pots. And we don't have to worry about that as much as some of our friends did, which was nice for us, bad for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that things have opened up at this point now that some restrictions are being lifted and, you know, businesses have been open for a little bit at this point?
Yeah, they're definitely getting better. Washington is one of the more strict states when it comes to COVID guidelines and things. And so I think even right now we're still in some counties, like in our county, Pierce County, I think we're still at like 25% capacity until June 30th or something. Oh, wow, and then apparently they're going to reopen the whole state. I'm not really sure. But so it's like, even right now we're doing a wedding at the end of June and they're kind of like, there might be 50 people and there might be 150 people and we're not really sure. And I'm like, okay, like good to be prepared. I'll bring my 50 millimeter and my wide angle lens just in case. And, but yeah, so like we had one bride who's had to reschedule her wedding like 3 different times, which
Goodness.
I just so feel for them, and it's hard for you as a business owner because you're like, well, those are days that I could have been booking, but I'm like, but this is completely out of your control, so I'm not gonna not film or make you pay more or whatever.
Right.
But I definitely feel like we in the creative industry have kind of gotten the short end of the stick on this whole thing.
Yeah. And it's so tough because, you write into your contract that they paid for that day.
Mm-hmm.
There are no refunds. Essentially, you can try. It's up to your discretion to reschedule if you wanted to, but it so that's a business decision. But then it comes down to this kind of like moral conundrum of like I feel for you, but at the same time I gotta eat and I gotta keep my business running. So it's a hard line to toe there.
Yeah. Thankfully, the people that we've worked with have been really understanding about that and have just kind of said, like, we realize you've sacrificed a lot. What can we do to make your day easier when you're here, And so it's kind of 50-50 whether or not people tip you when you're at a wedding. Sometimes you get that. Most of the time you don't, but it's just a happy surprise. But like the gal last year, she gave us, I think, $100 each as a tip or something, which is like, you didn't have to do that. That was really sweet. Making you more than just dinner. Like they had little sack lunches for it. And so I think just on a human level, everyone's like, none of us have ever done this before. And so I think it's just bringing out a good side of humanity in people that we don't often see on our Facebook feeds, which is kind of nice to see. So
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Quick aside, have you ever officiated a wedding and been the videographer at the same wedding?
No, thank God. And I never will. If anyone ever asks me to, that would be a hard pass. Hard pass. Have you done that?
No. Yeah. Not me, but I'm sure there's someone out there who's packaging themselves up as a wedding officiant and a videographer. And
they're probably crazy.
Yeah.
I just lost you at least one follower for saying that, so my apologies.
That's too funny. So what is the biggest challenge that you say you're facing with your business today, and how are you handling it?
That's a really great question. I think, honestly, motivation. As kind of a side gig, and I mean, honestly, pastoring people just takes a lot of time out of you. Like, you're there for people in the peaks and valleys. And so learning how do I care for myself while I'm caring for other people. And so for my business, it can be really hard for me to want to seek out new opportunities, to want to build my portfolio, or even when inquiries just come in, being like, it's summertime, the lake is like 5 minutes down the road from me, whatever. But it's like, but I would also love to pay off my car or have this financial goal that this could really help me jump to. And so just for me personally, it's procrastination and motivation. And so I find myself frequently, it really helps me to journal. And so one of the rhythms that I have in my life is every day I kind of wake up and I kind of write down, like, what are the 5 things that I want to get done today, and have a daily goal. But then I also have long-term goals. So like by the end of the year, what do I want to accomplish professionally, financially, and things like that? And being like, okay, will taking this job help me reach this goal? And if the answer is yes, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to put all this other stuff aside because this is something that I value, that's important to me. And if this can be a stepping stone to that, then it's worth it every single time. And so, yeah, that's probably not the typical answer that you would get from that question, but
no, it certainly wasn't, but that's okay. And what you said about, like, you have to be so introspective and self-reflective when you're doing this as a side gig.
Yeah.
That's something I've encountered so much is, you don't necessarily need the income or so. Of course, it'd be nice and we'd be able to get to our goals a lot quicker if we kind of just went gung-ho and all in on that.
Yeah.
But it's really just pushing yourself to do that. And I love that you kind of reevaluate that that as every new inquiry comes in, or every day you're thinking like, how is this going to get closer? How is this going to get me closer to my short-term goal and my long-term goal? And I'm definitely gonna steal that from you, because I've been struggling with that myself. Because I just launched my company in February of this year, so I'm still relatively new. I've been freelancing before then, but this, like, I was like, okay, we're gonna actually be official. We're gonna have an LLC, because I want to start, taking on bigger projects, and I don't want to get sued or anything. So so I ended up kind of, and with the pandemic, we've been very conservative during this time. Like, we've been staying in the house, haven't been going anywhere. So this past couple months, or past couple weeks rather, this month really, or in May, I really started just kind of testing the waters and scheduling a shoot here or there. But I ended up scheduling a shoot for this past Sunday, and the individual canceled after we had discussed, and this is a little bit of event sesh right now, but after we had discussed the whole process and everything, I bought some new equipment to support my goals for this shoot, and I sent them the contract, and they had only expected to pay a quarter of what the actual video is worth. Mind you, I'm just starting out, so I was giving her a very steep discount.
Oh gosh.
And so ended up being for, 17 hours of work. This individual expected to pay like $150, $175. And I was just taking it back. But it's kind of one of those things when you're doing this. If I were doing this full time, that would have hurt me financially and definitely hurt my pride, and I would have been, unmotivated from it. But I'm kind of taking it now as like, that door closed, another door will open, a better opportunity will come through. So it's certainly a journey, balancing full time and having this as a side gig. But I would say it comes with more benefits than disadvantages, in my opinion.
I would totally agree. And, one thing I'm really passionate about is I just think Americans get a lot of things wrong. The buzzwords the last couple of years have been like hustle and grind and whatever. And I'm like, okay, but what do you get from that? Like, statistically, Americans are the most stressed out, depressed, and suicidal people in the world. Yeah. And when you look at why that is, like, there's so many studies, there's so many books that have been written that it comes back to the American workday and the pressure that we put on ourselves to hustle and grind. And so about a year and a half ago, I just decided that I don't want that to be my life. Like, I want my life to be present to the moment, to be an emotionally safe space for people. And I can't do that if I'm hustling and bustling around everywhere. I can only do that if I'm the healthiest version of myself, and if I'm slowing down enough to create space for people to do that. And so, even when inquiries come in to do this job, I'm looking at my week and I'm going, well, what else do I have going on this week? And it's like, well, I haven't spent time with my family or my friends because I've been so busy doing all these other things. And so that $2,500 would be really nice, but 50 years from now, that really fun trip to go hiking at Mount Rainier is probably going to be more memorable than whatever I did with that money. And so even just trying to push back on that American hustle and grind mindset is really important for Katy and I to have in our business together, to always prioritize people over profit.
Wow. For every episode, I take a soundbite and I use it as the promotion for the episode, or the reel for this episode. And as you were speaking, I was like, yep, mental note, gonna cut this part out and promote it. Amazing.
Nailed it.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree. And just being intentional and just slowing down. I've been able to kind of enjoy the process of starting this business. I found that a lot of people in the filmmaking industry, there's this habit that they have of, I'm going to quit my job cold turkey and I'm going to go 100% in on this. And they have to, like you were saying, hustle and bustle and grind every day, all the time, leads, like taking every gig they can get. And then in 6 months, they're like, oh, I'm really burnt out, or I'm not enjoying this as much as I thought I would. And it's because, I don't know, the film industry, I think it has this kind of sentiment of, you got to go, go, go. If you don't get the gig, somebody else is going to get the gig. If they get more gigs than you, then you'll be out of business. You know, you have to constantly be growing and honing your skills and doing these things. And you can do those things, but you can slow down and do it, or you can do it with your own personal projects. Not everything has to be for, you know, for clients. Not everything has to be for the most amount of money in the least amount of time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, and even like you experienced, you know, like how many bad clients do you find before you get one good one? And so then you're putting all this time and effort and energy into something that's only frustration, where it's like if you were more discerning, not you, but people were more discerning and waited for the good client to come, then it's like you're going to make just as much money with a quarter of the work that you would have put into that in the first place. With a lot
less headache. Yeah. Exactly.
Totally.
Amazing. So we are approaching the hour here. But I just want to ask, what is the project that you're most proud of?
That's a great question. I actually don't know if we've posted it on our site yet. And if not, I'm going to do that today. But we actually created a music video for our church. So the song we did was a cover. It was called House on a Hill by Bethel Music. But we had done that at our Christmas service. And of anything we've done in the last 4 years, that song got the biggest response from people. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Wow. And everyone was like, hey, you should like make a video of, and it's actually Darcy singing it. She's incredibly talented. It was actually her singing it. And they were like, you should make a music video of that. And so we put Darcy in a beautiful red dress and took her up to snowy Mount Rainier and stuffed hand warmers in her boots. And it was one of the most miserable days for her, I think, but it was so fun. Wow. Because, I mean, there was no one there. So we had all this epic scenery to ourselves, singing about this quiet moment, you know, being in a house on a hill, just like you and God, whatever. Yeah. And we got to go to all these different places, and she just got to sing at the top of her lungs on a mountain, like literally living out the sound of music, which is like, you know, I feel like every girl's dream, maybe. And just the way that all of that came together from beginning to end was so smooth, and was so fun. And again, getting to tell the story, and we have this moment where she's on a bridge, and the bridge is over this epic river, and it just starts the most gentle snowfall. And it was like, we literally could not have planned this better if we hired someone to make fake snow. Like, it was the most magical moment, and you just see the joy on Darcy's face, and the whole video from start to finish was almost just surreal. And that was just a passion project. Like, didn't make any money off of it, didn't really blow up on YouTube or anything like that. It was just a fun thing that I got to do with my two best friends. And it turned out beautifully, and we're all super proud of it. And so yeah, I'll have to post that on our site so people can see that, because I don't think we've done that yet. Yes,
please do. And we'll absolutely look out for that video. Do you have any exciting projects coming up that you want to plug?
Man, honestly, not really. So boring. I mean, we just have a couple weddings and stuff this year, but I'm just probably the most normal, boring person that you'll ever meet. And so,
are you kidding me? Based on this episode, you're one of the most interesting people I've ever met.
You're so cute. Thank you. Back at you. I enjoy this. Wish we lived closer so we could get a beer or something. That would have been cool,
I know. Seriously, if I'm ever out in Washington.
I know, if I'm ever on the East Coast. But yeah, no, like, we just have a few weddings coming up, and you know, senior photography and stuff like that. Life's ordinary moments, which are the ones that we love the most. So yeah,
I love that. Yeah. What is one thing about your story or your journey that you want the people listening to remember?
Oh my gosh, what a hard hitter question just to end things on.
That's what we end with. We love it.
Yeah. Oh man. You know, I think particularly for women, I would say that trying to step into some of these male-dominated spaces can be really scary and really intimidating. And I would just encourage people to remember that you're not alone. Seeking out that community can be really hard, especially, you know, I'm really unique in that I have 3 of my best friends always championing me, but that's not everyone's reality. And so I would say, especially for women, seek that out. Because once you find that group of women, I mean, that's a force to be reckoned with. Women who celebrate other women. And if you don't have that, be that person, and you will naturally attract those people. Like when you're just the woman who is celebrating that lady who owns that small business down the street, or you're posting other videos or photos or things like that from other people, people are naturally just going to go, man, there's something different about her. And there's something in there that I want that I don't have, but I need this, you know? And I think that's why we were all so gravitating towards your podcast. It was like, she wants to take just these, you know, Jill schmoes from nowhere where no one knows our name. And she wants to lift us up. Like, why are we deserving of that? But that was just so cool of you to be able to do that. And I'm telling all my friends, I'm like, I'm going to be featured on a podcast. And they're like, oh, really? I'll go share that. I'm like, that's awesome. Thank you. And so, yeah, just don't be afraid to be the shoulders that someone else gets to stand on, because that's a really powerful legacy to leave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would love to end the episode on that, but I do have another question for you.
Do it.
It's because we have to know where to find you on the interwebs and on social media, but I wish I'd started with that so that we could just like fade out slowly with the music. And
just do some fancy editing, right?
Right.
For video
right.
people, you can do that.
Perfect. So where can the viewers and listeners of this podcast find you?
Yeah, so our company website is dreammediateam.com.
Which
we are. Yeah, it's pretty baller. I'm not gonna lie. We're pretty fun. And then Instagram, I don't post a lot. I mean, I'm 30. I'm kind of like, I don't know how to be trendy. But if you just want to follow my personal life, it's at Katy, Katy_Payne, Payne. And then Katy Cahill, who by far posts way more epic content than I do. She's at Katy, Katie X Cahill, Cahill. So
amazing. So
yeah.
I'm definitely going to follow both of you, but yes, all the listeners need to go over and follow this dream team, this powerhouse of these two baller women really taking the filming industry by storm. Last question for you, Katy. How can the viewers and listeners of this podcast support you as a filmmaker?
Man, I would say not supporting me specifically, because I like my life's good, my business is good, or whatever. Find a woman who you can invest in, whatever business that is, whether it's a videographer, photographer, store owner, whatever, and lift her up this week and purchase something from her, promote her on your Instagram or on your Facebook. And my hope is just that, you know, like I said, we won't need #female filmmaker any longer, that when we just search filmmaker, we'll pop up. And that only happens by us supporting each other. So I think that's my biggest ask.
Absolutely. And this is where it starts. It starts with you and me and the listeners of this podcast. Katy, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I feel like I've made a friend. We had such a wonderful conversation, and I'm so excited to stay connected with you as we continue to uplift women in this male-dominated space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. And if you're ever in Seattle, give me a call.
I might have to make a trip out to Seattle specifically to see you and Katy now. I got to see the Katys live in action.
We have a really comfy couch bed that you can stay on, so you're welcome anytime.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next episode. Bye.